Okay, perfect. So we'll start off with the session. All right. So today's agenda is I'll be presenting on SQL IaaS, which is Infrastructure as a Service. Right. This is a level 100 session where you'll be able to understand what are our goals. When do you need to move to SQL VM, or what is the right time? What offerings are there on SQL VM, right? And what do you have in store on Azure when you are specifically using SQL, when you want to deploy SQL VMs. All right, so we'll start off with the session. So just a little bit introduction about myself. I work at Microsoft from last 5.5 years, and I've been presenting at different various places, including Dear Azure, right? I've been presenting at the Bangalore UG Meet, and as well as some other places as well online. So I've worked across multiple technologies like SharePoint Online, SharePoint on-premise, SharePoint development, SQL on-premise, and SQL on Azure, right? And yeah, I've been with Microsoft for 5.5 years. Currently working on TAAS and IaaS at Microsoft for SQL VMs, right? Okay, let me just go ahead and start the session. All right. So what we are going to discuss is, what offerings are available on Azure, right? When you want to deploy SQL VMs, or when you want to go for a SQL database, which is a PaaS service, what offerings do we have? You know, when do you think is the right time? If you think, you're spending too much, on the hardware costs, networking cost, and what do we have in store for you on Azure, right? Will be, our main agenda. So normally this gives you a basic glimpse, what is SQL, or how does SQL look when you're using it on Azure. All right. All right. So what is IaaS? Infrastructure as a service, right? So what do we have here? There are different various terms you can see: platform as a service, software as a service, on-premise, right? On-premise is, totally when you have your own data centers, when you have your own hardware, right? Storage, networks, right? And you're spending too much, managing, you have so many database administrators, you have multiple web application network admins, who will go ahead and handle this on-premise infrastructure. So Microsoft makes it easy for you when you deploy, any of your software, either it be SQL, either it be CRM, either any of the products which you are using like SCCM and everything. When you go to Azure, right, you have like very minimal administrative, work to do. Your administration part cuts off, you save a lot of money there. Plus we have a hybrid cloud storage here, right? So most of the time you think, why do I need to manage storage? You're paying for storage, you're buying disks, right? You're buying some hardware, you buy, you pay for your bandwidth, networks, servers. So you're spending a lot of, money there. So how is Azure beneficial for you is, when you come to Azure, you can use, these services which are IaaS, PaaS, software as a service. What we help you to do is minimize your workload, right? Or administrative capabilities, right? So we have like, these structures available where Microsoft takes care of your whole infrastructure, whether it is storage, whether it is your server, right? Whether it is the network part. So it's only very minimal administrative effort you have to put in when you are on Azure. Plus, we guarantee a SLA time as well for each of the services. So what if my data center goes down, right? What I don't have backups? What if I don't have backups, right? So Microsoft provides all the services which you require, end-to-end service where you will be, able to restore your services if something goes down, or a disaster happens, right? So Microsoft will go ahead and help you out in such scenarios. We have dedicated support teams as well, who handles, and helps out on the IaaS and PaaS and software as a service as well. So as per support as well, we provide support as well for all of this, right? Plus, you don't have to, spend more basically hiring multiple network engineers or storage engineers, right? So once you come to Azure, your administration or uh, your main goal of handling all of the technologies here, right, reduces. So you don't need to look at the servers daily, right? If you have everything in place, you are sure that when you are planning to reboot, because with Microsoft we make sure once you have like different kind of technologies are there, like availability sets, availability zones, so we make sure your servers are up and running, right? Even if there is a data center failure, we make sure we get those restored and recovered as soon as possible with 99.95% of SLA time, right? So these are the differences when it comes to platform as a service, right? I can give you a simple example, which is a SQL database, right? Where you don't have to manage your disks. Your database files are stored on the disk, you don't have to manage. Microsoft will take care of it. Okay. When it comes to infrastructure as a service, it's just like an on-premise machine. Okay. Just like you have installed SQL Server on an on-premise machine, but you don't have to look at the disks or storage or the virtual machine, because Microsoft is taking care of it. All you need to do is take care of your applications, right? You just need to take care of your applications, data, right? Then web application, rest everything Microsoft takes care when it comes to infrastructure. If you talk about software as a service, I think you might have used SharePoint Online, which is incorporated with Office 365, which you can call as a software as a service, where you go ahead and upload your documents, libraries. So there, you don't need to worry about anything, because everything is taken care by Microsoft. Your networking, storage, servers, virtualization, all you get is a web interface, right? Front end, where you can go ahead and use that software. It's kind of a software. You go ahead and use it. You don't need to worry about what is going on in the backend. So that's what all these terms means, right? IaaS, PaaS, software as a service. So with IaaS, we are gonna just focus on IaaS today. I'm gonna explain you, about the offerings and stuff. So next, let's say you are a, mid business company, right? Small sized company, and you want to go ahead and migrate your SQL Server. So there are two options for you. One is PaaS and one is IaaS. So what we are going to discuss in today's session is just IaaS. Tomorrow we'll discuss about PaaS. So how do you plan? So first of all, you decide, right? If I want to move to Azure, what kind of OS, what version of OS do I want? 2016, 2019, 2012, or 20, right? 2008. So regarding that, you will go ahead and plan, how do I plan, what offerings do I need from Azure? We've got multiple offerings, right? For SQL itself, we have so many offerings. When it comes to Windows, we have different flavors of Windows available, right? We have like all prototype images available on the Azure portal, which I will show you in some time. How we can go ahead and deploy a VM, or what kind of offerings you have, which you can select. So normally, when you're planning an infrastructure on your on-premise, right, you would normally think, okay, I want a 2012 OS with maybe 2014 SQL Server with storage capabilities, might be HDD or SSD disks, right? My network bandwidth should be this much, right? So with IaaS, normally we do the same thing, right? We will go ahead and what version you need, what storage you want, and what networking you want. Okay, compute is CPU plus memory, how much CPU and memory you want, right? We have different flavors of plans, right? Different series of VMs. So there are D series VMs, S series VMs, right? F series, G series VMs. So what happens in this is, you get different options, how much RAM you want, how much memory you want. With each VM size, you get a different network bandwidth, right? So it totally depends. We have so many options for you. What is your current workload? You can compare to your on-premise. Okay, how much CPU you have, how much memory you have. Then you can plan, to select an offering on Azure. Okay, I want to go with this offering. So there are different options which you can go through. So many plans we have in store for you, so that you can decide on what infrastructure or what storage you want to go with, or what how many number of CPUs require. So let's move on to the next slide. All right. So what we're going to discuss here is this is a basic architecture, normal simple architecture, how your VM looks like in Azure. Okay. So you have your VM here, right? Virtual machine, correct? And this is a load balancer. Now, load balancer, we won't go into much depth, but normally you can discuss, yeah, right? Whenever you have any connections coming in, it gets balanced, from a network layer part. So, load balancer normally routes your connections. Okay. We have disk or blob storage here, right? You can store your data files or log files or text files on this disk storage. Plus, we have a virtual network. So this is how it looks like, just like an on-premise, but just hosted on the cloud service, right? So we'll go on with the demo now. Okay, I'll discuss on how we can go ahead and deploy an Azure VM. So this is how my Azure portal looks like. Okay. What we'll be discussing is there are a lot of options on Azure because Azure is very vast, right? We're gonna just focus on main common options which are available and important options, right? Because we have less amount of time as well, right? We need to finish this in an hour. So what we're gonna discuss here is how we can go ahead and create a virtual machine. What offerings do we have? How we can go ahead and select what kind of disks we want, right? Or if you have any host caching, disk caching. So we'll get on to that once we start deployment. So this is how my Azure portal looks like. I go to the virtual machines on the left hand corner, right? I will go ahead and click on add. So this is like I want to create a new virtual machine here, right? So this is nothing but just like a machine hosted on cloud. Okay. So this is nothing but my subscription ID, and this is a resource group. Now, what is a resource group? Resource group is nothing but a container, you can say, right? Just like a folder where you have all your files, right? So resource group on Azure is like you have multiple things available inside it. Like your virtual machine will be stored inside it, your disks will be stored inside it, your NIC card, your network resources would be stored inside it, right? Your public IPs, and other various stuff like storage accounts and all will be stored in a resource group. So what we are going to do is we're just going to create a test resource group right here. Just give it a name, demo. Okay. Now I just want to give a virtual machine name, so I'll give demo. All right. So you get various options where you want to deploy, the virtual machine according to your region. So we've got so many regions available here, right? Central US, Canada, India. So for now, I'll just select Central India here, and availability set. Now, this is a very important option when you're deploying a Azure virtual machine. Let's say you have something like high availability setup, like always on or SQL FCI, right? So you want to go ahead and make sure, at one time, my one machine should be always up and running, right? So let's say you have two machines in a high availability scenario, right? You want one of the machines to be always up. Even if something goes wrong, right, a disaster happens, you want one of the machines to be up. So for that, you define an availability set. You add two of your machines to that availability set. That availability set job is to make sure at one point of time, at least one VM should be up and running. Okay, even if the data center goes down, or even if there is something, a critical update which is pushed by Microsoft, right, which needs a reboot of the VM, it makes sure your availability set will make sure, okay, one of the VM is at least up and online, your production does not go down. All right. So that is the use of availability set. Now there is an option here, image, right? So what we see is there are various options here for images which we have. We got Ubuntu, we got Linux, so we got multiple images, whatever you want according to your requirements. So as you can see, right, I've got just few images showing up here: Ubuntu, Red Hat, CentOS, Windows Server, right? But there are a lot of images available. I'll just click on browse all the images. So what we are planning to do is we're just planning to deploy a SQL server on a virtual machine, right? So as you can see, right, we got so many options, which you want to go with Postgres, core OS, Linux. So there are a lot of things when you're thinking about, it's not just related to SQL, but we got a lot of variety available for you. What kind of OS you want, or what kind of products you want, right? SharePoint or SQL Server or CRM. So we have so many options available for you to go ahead and deploy that. All right, so what we're going to do is we're going to look for SQL Server. I can select any version here. Let's say I select 2012. So as you can see, I've got so many options here available with different way. If you see the image names, right? These are nothing but the image names. SQL Server 2012 SP4 Enterprise on Windows 2012 R2, right? So we got different kind of setup here. You get 2016 as well with Windows 2016, right? And what we're going to do is we're not going to deploy 2012, we're going to deploy 2014 here. So as you can see, 2012 R2 we got, right? We got it on 2016 Windows Server as well. So we have a lot of flavors. Now, Microsoft also gives you the flexibility, right, to use your own license. So let's say if you have your own license, I've got my own SQL license, or I've got my own SharePoint license, right? I don't want to uh, pay for that to Microsoft, right? So we got this something called as BYOL, right? As you can see, bring your own license. Okay, so what this does is, normally you can go for these images. You can specify the product key. I want to, I have my own SharePoint product, or I have my own SQL product, right? I don't want to pay to Microsoft for SQL. I just want to pay for hosting my virtual machine on the cloud, right? So you can select that option as well. So even for Windows, if you have your own Windows license as well, you save a lot of money there. So you get those images as well as BYOL. So normally this means like you can bring your own license, use that license, and Microsoft would not charge you for the license. It will only charge for hosting, like hosting your disks or hosting your network and stuff. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna simply go with one of the images. Okay. Uh, Let me quickly go with SQL Server 2014. Okay, asking me to go to marketplace. Let's go ahead and deploy from the marketplace. All right. So what we're going to do is we're going to deploy a SQL Server 2014 standard version on Windows 2012 R2. Right. I'm just going to give a name. All right. Now, what we get an option here is we get an option of, so I think I cannot use capitals. Yeah. So let me just go ahead and use SQL demo. All right. All right, so VM disk type. So what kind of disk you want, right? With different type of disks, you get different type of IOPS. IOPS is nothing but how much input, output, throughput you want, right? So when you come with premium SSD, right, you get 500 IOPS. With standard SSD, you get 300 IOPS. So depending on your requirement or your workload, right, which you have, if you have an OLTP workload, or if you have, high workload, you can go ahead and select the type of disk you want, right? We normally recommend when you're on Azure and you're using SQL for production, we deploy a premium SQL Server disk here. So premium SSD disk, which has 500 apps, which would give you a better performance. So I'm just gonna fill in this details. All right. So resource group, I'm gonna go ahead and create new, as I said. It's nothing but a container which will hold your VMs and your network and stuff. Location, I want to deploy this. So here you get an option here, right? As you see, right? Save up to 49% with a license you already own. So if you have your own license, you don't need to pay for that, right? You save a lot of money there. So you're just paying for the hosting charges then. So already if you have a Windows license, you can select yes, and then it will ask you for the license key and stuff. But I'm just going to go normally now with the normal deployment, where it will charge me for the Windows license and SQL license. So here you get an option now. As I said, right, when you deploy a VM, you have multiple options for the VM sizes, right? So we've got B2S, B2MS. So these are all the different sizes available for your VM, what kind of VM you want to select. This is the number of cores you have, right? vCPUs is nothing but the number of cores you want for your machine, right? The amount of memory you want, 16 GB, 32 GB, the number of disks, which comes in. If you want, you can add additional as well later on, but when you deploy a VM, you normally get these number of disks, right? The number of IOPS, as I said, amount of IOPS which is supported. So input output which is supported. Then you got local SSD. This is nothing but a temporary drive. So when you deploy a machine on Azure, Microsoft gives you a temporary drive. That drive, you do not store your data, but you can keep your temporary files, because once the VM gets rebooted, right, those files can get deleted automatically. So normally we give a temporary drive which is very fast, right? For SQL, you can store your temp.db files on this local SSD, right? And then it tells you the cost, how much you have to pay, right? So as you can see, depending on the VMs you select, it will tell you how much cost you have to pay. So normally you get charged hourly basis, right, on Azure. And if you shut down the VM, okay, so once you shut down the VM, you do not get charged for the whole VM. So it totally depends. I had one of our customers, right? He had some services, related to travels, right? So all he wanted is, his travel. He did not have a website, but it was offline. All he wanted is to keep his Azure VM online only for 8 hours. So we had set a rule where it's Azure VM automatically gets shut down after 8 hours, right? So he does not have to pay extra accordingly. So this is just a estimated cost which it shows over here, right? But if you are not using it, if you deallocated the VM, deallocated means stopped the VM and released all the resources, then you don't get charged for that. So we'll go ahead and select one of the plans here, right? Now you get this option, availability zone. Again, as I said, right, if you can keep your virtual machine copies in different zones for high availability, as we discussed earlier, availability set as well, Microsoft will make sure one VM will be at least online if something goes wrong, right? So it will make sure your production is up and running if you deploy availability set. Okay. Now, there is something called managed disks, right? So if you use managed disks, right, we go ahead and create a storage account automatically on the background, and we go ahead and keep your disks, right? So if a disaster happens, let's say, okay, suddenly my data center went down, okay, and all my data was stored, right? So what will happen? My VM is down now. I don't have an option. I did not configure anything like availability set or high availability. So your data is preserved and safe. Why? Because once you use managed disks, right, it will go ahead and create a storage account. Storage account is nothing but, let's say, where you keep your C drive or D drive, right? So these managed disks will be stored in a storage account, right, which Azure will automatically create on the backend. So even if you don't have access to the VM goes down, right, we still have the data there. So we can restore that data to a new VM. So there are a lot of options available when it comes to disaster and recovery. We make sure we preserve your data well, right? And everything is managed by you, right? We only make sure we try to simplify things for you. We're trying to reduce the administrative things for you, right? You don't have to look at the networking, storage, right? Everything is taken care by Microsoft. Even if there is some maintenance going on, right, you get notified on Azure portal. Okay, we have some maintenance going in this region, Central India region. So that is how we how flexible this Azure portal is, how flexible you can use, very easy to use. So virtual network, we'll go to the next option. Sorry. Okay, so virtual network, so what you can do is you can create a virtual network of your own, right, with different types of addresses you want, right? And you can use that for your VM. You can have multiple subnets as well, right, for the same VM if you want, or you can create multiple subnets with two virtual networks if you have a high availability and a DR scenario, right? So you can have two virtual networks with two different subnets. One will act as a primary, one will act as a DR, so that at least if something goes wrong on the primary side, you have the DR available, Public IP address is nothing but it's the IP address which is available for you to connect to the VM, right? This can also be static, right? So by default, it will go ahead and create a new public address for me. But if I don't want, I can go ahead and remove that as well. So I can say I don't want a public IP address. So that is nothing used for connection to the VM. Now, network security group is nothing but NSG, short form. Network security group. It's nothing but whom do you want your VM to connect to? So just like Windows Firewall you have, right? This is an extra added layer at Azure portal where we, make sure, right? Let's say you deploy a SQL VM and you only want connections from a particular IP address, or maybe you only want, connections to a particular port when it comes to SQL. So this is where you define a network security group, right? You will specify what kind of ports you want, inbound ports. So you just like creating an inbound rule when you create in Windows Firewall. So I'll say I just want an RDP 3389 port so that I can connect, right? But you can still modify that and specify, from which IP addresses you want to connect to. So further that you can drill down, if you want to specify that at a subnet level, from which subnet, the connection should connect to. All right. So these are not much important, but yeah, there is an auto shutdown option available as well. What time you want to automatically shut down, the VM if you want to. Then we got boot diagnostics. So this boot diagnostics is nothing but, let's say your VM is suddenly not starting, right? So what to do? I mean, let's say, you don't want to open a support ticket, you want to diagnose yourself. So what we do is when we enable this boot diagnostics, we create a log file in a storage account. Once the VM gets created, you'll be able to see, where is the file stored. So normally we create a, file and we store it in the storage account. From that file, we can come to know why the VM is not getting started. We can analyze that log and find out, what is going on. Why is the VM not booting up? So that is what we go ahead and configure the boot diagnostics for, and this is the storage account which we need to configure to store these files, right? So I'm just going to go ahead and specify the storage account. I'll use an existing one, right? So normally storage account is nothing, as I said, right? You can store your files, you can store even MDF, LDF, your SQL backup files on the storage account. So we'll go ahead and click on OK. We'll go to the next setting, which is specifically for SQL Server. All right. So what port we want SQL Server to be on, what connections we want into when we connect to SQL, it's 1433, right? SQL authentication, if you want an SA account to be enabled, we give a username and password. Storage configuration. Here you can select, how much storage configuration or what is your workload, when you're using the Azure portal. So this is the general configuration. You don't need to change here anything. You can keep it default, right? So automated patching. So we'll come to that, once we deploy the VM. I have this features listed right, in the next slide. So these are very important when it comes to, managing or, SQL Server. Where I've seen many of us use these features day to day. So I'll discuss them, right, in the next slide. So let me go ahead and click on OK here. Let's go ahead and quickly deploy a VM. Uh, Hardly it would take like 4 to 5 minutes for the VM to get deployed, and then we will be able to connect. So, okay, I think this is stuck. Let me go back to this one. All right, maybe some blade issues. Let's see. All right, so let me do one thing. We'll go ahead and quickly go back here. Just push it forward. Maybe it will come back. I don't see any errors here, so looks good. So accelerated networking, we forgot to talk about this. Accelerated networking is nothing but if you have a high usage, this normally helps you to prevent network latency, right? You can enable that or disable that according to your usage. So let me go ahead and let's say we've got a VM deployed. So maybe I'm just not able to create it. I'll have to go through all the options again to specify that. So let's say we've already deployed a VM, right? Now the VM is deployed. I already have a machine here. So what we can do is, this is our SQL 2014 machine available here, right? So normally once you deploy the VM, right? Once you go to the overview, right? You can see these options, right? This is a resource group. Now, if I go to the resource group, you can see it's like a container. I have everything here. I have my disks, I have my virtual network, I have my VM, storage account, public IP address, energies, right? Everything in here. So it's like a container which stores all your resources, right? Again, once we go back to the overview, we'll see here, you can see the status is running, the location, then you can see the virtual network, right, which you have deployed. This is the public IP address which you will use to connect to the VM. Now you can see what size of the VM I have, right? What if my workload gets increased, right? I want to go ahead and, I need 4 CPUs. I want to go to 16 GB RAM, right? So there is an option for that as well. If you go to sizes here, right, you get an option to scale this up. So let's say I'm not satisfied with 2 CPUs. I want more, right? I can go ahead and scale that up. Okay, I want to scale up to 16, GB RAM and 4 CPUs instead of that. So I can anytime go ahead and scale my VM up and down, right? So that's how you get the flexibility. You think my performance is getting low, my VM is very slow, I want some more RAM, right? You go ahead and straightforwardly increase the VM size, right? Or decrease it according to your needs, and it will go ahead and resize everything, right? It will go ahead and change the amount of CPU and memory you have. Data will be there, safe, everything will be automatically taken care of. So only the VM size will change there, right? The amount of CPUs and memory which will get added, or the amount of disks you want according to the plan. So yeah, as you can see, computer name is here, operating system is here. What we're going to do is we'll go ahead and quickly connect to the VM, right? So this is my public IP. So I'll go ahead and click on this connect option on the top, right? So as you can see, this will allow us to go ahead and connect to the virtual machine. I have an option to restart. If I want to capture a snapshot of the VM, right, like we do in Hyper-Vs, right, I get an option to capture this as well. Now, one more thing I wanted to show off before we go ahead and connect is virtual machines here, right? As you can see here, the status stop deallocated means you won't get charged, okay, for the VM. But one thing I want to make sure is, you won't get charged for the compute, CPU, RAM, network, right? Virtual machine which you're using, because at Microsoft infrastructure level, that gets shared, across, the whole infrastructure. So your disk will not get shared, right? But rest, as you can see, virtual networks, right, or networking bandwidth or CPU memory, everything gets shared. So if you deallocate, right, your public IP can be used by some other customer. So that's how you can define a static IP if you don't want your IP to be changed. But if you deallocate, right, that means you are releasing all your resources. So Microsoft will not charge you accordingly. So only thing you get charged for is disk, because your disks are attached to the VM, right? And your disks will have any data which you store, right? So only thing when you get charged, even if the VM stops, is only the disks. But you don't get charged for the network or store, anything else like CPU, memory, or the compute resources. So that is one good thing, about Azure. So I think, is anyone able to hear me? I think maybe it got disconnected. Hello?
Yes, Ujjwal, we can hear you.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
okay,
yeah,
good
yeah.
to hear you.
Okay, perfect.
Yes, yes, you will carry on.
Perfect. Correct. I just wanted to make sure. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
So that is how, you get this flexibility, of not getting charged. If you want to just deploy it for test purposes before migration, you can use a free credit, right, for Azure to go ahead and deploy, any of the VMs and use it and feel for yourself. So you don't get charged. So you get at least, I think, $200 maybe. I'm not sure if it is changed now, but earlier we used to provide $200 credit if you want to go ahead and try out Azure. So that is how, that flexibility comes from. So once you stop this, right, it gets deallocated. Okay. So you only get charged for disks. Now, we'll focus mainly on the main options here, okay, which are important and commonly used. One is the networking part, right? Here you can see, as I said, right, NSG. So NSG is nothing but network security group, right? You can define, what ports you want the connection from, these are the inbound connections. So that means if you're connecting from your, local on-premise machines and you want to connect, to the Azure VM, so what ports, we should listen on, the Azure VM should listen on. So 1433 is for SQL, 3389 is by default for RDP, right? Here I can specify any of the source IP address, or if I want a range, right? Or I want my SQL VM to connect only from one IP address. Nobody else should able to connect. So I can select these options. Okay. So what port I want, what kind of protocol, TCP connection, or is it a UDP connection? So this is how you specify and create a rule, inbound and outbound. This is what NSG is used for, right? Now we got accelerated networking, as I said, right? Helps in reducing network latency if you enable that. If you have too much use of bandwidth, so accelerated networking is useful in that scenario. Public IP is nothing. When we connect a VM, we use this IP address, right? Subnet, this is your subnet, right? So this is all about networking, right? You can add multiple NIC cards as well. There's an option, attach network interface. So next we'll come to disks, right? By default, I deployed a VM which gave me two disks, right? One is a premium SSD disk and one is an OS disk here, right? Now, as you can see, right, the type of storage account you see, right, here, as I said, all your disks get stored in the storage account here, right? So these are premium SSD. That means I have a better throughput. Premium disks will always have 500 IOPS. So depending, there are different various options in premium as well. Like, you know, so as I said, right, there are different VM sizes. There are also different disk sizes depending on your workload. So if your workload is very heavy, right, there are P10, P20, P30, P40 disk sizes. All of them have different throughput capabilities to support your workloads. So if you're doing too much of inserts, updates, delete, reads, right? According to that, we have different types of disks available, right? Host caching is nothing but, let's say you have a database and you run select queries on it mostly. You're not doing much inserts, updates. So it's like a simple web application hosted on Azure, which connects to your database, which will only do the reading operations, right? So what we do is for such, disks, right? We normally specify the host caching as read only, and your data files will be stored on that disk. So normally we are just reading it. So what this will do is this will make the read faster, right? So that is why we have these options. Host caching, read and write. If you're doing too much of writes and you're writing the same data, right? So it will cache those. So this is probably a feature to improve more performance when it comes to IO on your disks and all. So this is how you can add multiple disks here. When I click on add a disks, I can specify what kind of disks I want, right? And then I can select what kind of read caching and all I want. So value should not be empty. I can select what disks I want here, right? I can select read write depending, and I can go ahead and add any disks, inside the VM. So again, when we come to size, as I discussed, right? Size is for resizing. If you want the number of CPUs, I want 15 CPUs accordingly, it will show you the plan. So it's very user friendly. You go ahead and change this. You will be able to see what VM sizes support 64 CPUs, right? And if you select, the disk type, I want only premium disk, so it will just select you those plans accordingly. So again, you have this flexibility anytime. Even if you have a server, right? Anytime you will go ahead and add disk, you will purchase disk. So here we are not charging you for purchasing a disk or something or adding a disk. We are just charging you for the compute time or how much time you are using that resource, right? If you shut down the VM, we won't charge you. But for disks, yes, we charge because you keep your data on the disks and disks are not shared. The data is private to you. Disks are not shared among different people, right? Or among the infrastructure like we do for network and all. So that reduces the cost when you compare your on-premise to Azure, right? That will reduce your cost. I will show you how, but normally on on-premise you will buy your own bandwidth, you will buy your own disks, right? You will attach more disks, you will buy your own hardware, right, for your servers, right? So for on Azure, we don't do that. We don't charge you, right, for buying the disks. We only charge you for the compute time when you're using it. So that is one benefit, when you move to Azure. And then we see different options like security here, right? Here you get an recommendation if there is anything which your VM can be at risk at. So probably you apply disk encryption or in install endpoint protection on the Azure VMs. So these are all the recommendations which we give, right? If we think your VM might be at risk, so probably you can follow those. So that is one part. Then we come to extensions, right? As I said, right, a SQL IaaS extension. I will tell you what it is as I have it in the next slide, even the SQL configuration portal here, right? So availability set, as I already discussed, is used to make sure at least one VM is up and running anytime at any point of time, right? Plus we have something called VM backup. If you want to back up your VM, just like taking an image snapshot of the VM, right? You go ahead and use this service. It will go ahead and back up your VM anytime. If you want to go ahead and restore the VM, you can restore it, or if you want to restore it to a different resource group altogether or to a different region, we have so much things here that you can migrate your VM from one region to another, one subscription to another subscription. So there are a lot of options. You can take a snapshot of this VMs. We also have an option for disaster recovery. What happens if your VM, let's say if the data center goes down, so you have to enable this, it gets replicated. You can enable this VM to get replicated to some other region. So that is how you prevent using disaster recovery. You have a lot of options here uh, to make sure your production is always up and running. That's why we guarantee a 99.95% time of SLA. Your VM will be up and running. Okay. So plus we have like metrics, if you want to see like my CPU usage from last 24 hours, or my memory usage. So there are different types of metrics here: CPU credits, amount of data which is being read on the disk. So as you can see, right, it says preview here. This is because these features are still coming in, but they are developed, but they're still working on it on the background. So you can still use these features, but they're soon gonna come in. That's why it says preview here. So we have a lot of counters. This is nothing but like a perfmon if you have used, right? So to identify what was going on, right, in the last 24 hours. So we store a lot of telemetry at the back end, right, to um, make it very visible to you how your VM looks. Is it very good or is it bad? You need to upgrade something. So we store a lot of data on the background just related to your VM performance, so that you can find out, okay, my VM was very slow at this point of time. I need to check, or I need to contact Microsoft why it is slow, so that they can help me out fixing the problem. So then again, we've got various options here. As you can see, resource health, right? This is one important option. If something is, or if our product team is working, right, on some of the regions, right? So here you can see the resource health would either show as a warning or, some error. So here, as you can see, it says there are no problems affecting my Azure VM as of now. But as I can see, your virtual machine was unavailable. There was some health issues which was recently on 10/13, but it says ongoing, but I think it's fixed now. So probably you have a lot of options. Again, as I said, boot diagnostics, right? When your VM gets booted, let's say it's not getting booted, right? So it will tell you, what the log file says. Everything is listed here. So you'll be able to see if my VM is not getting booted. I can check the log file, or I can download it from the storage account. Now reset password. If you forgot your VM password, right, you get an option here to reset your VM password. And at the end, you get an option here, new support request, right? So you get minimum free tickets to go ahead and open. There are also plans where you can open unlimited tickets. So you can go ahead and create this ticket, right? It will come to Microsoft. We will go ahead and handle those problems out for you. anything related to SQL or Windows or anything, and we can help you out. So this does not get charged, but you normally have to have a support plan. So ideally, you get a support plan. Okay. With enterprise, it's always free. You get as many tickets as you want. But I think if you are normally not on enterprise or pay as you go, you might have to shed in some extra coins to get the support plan. But yeah, we normally anytime when it's Azure, right, we help anyone out, to fix the problem. So it's not related to charging you more or something. But yeah, uh, this is how the overview also shows the amount of CPU used, right, in the last 1 hour or in the last 30 days. So we store that amount of telemetry, how my CPU looks, how my disk is, how my network is looking. So this is how, you can measure your performance, before migrating to Azure. You can test out, your applications. So not just virtual machines, but we have a lot of options. As you can see, right, these are only important options listed here, right? If I go to create a resource, right, we have a lot of options when it comes to web. I want to go ahead and deploy a web application, right? So there are a lot of things available on Azure, which will meet your, enterprise requirements, right? So we'll go back to virtual machine. I'm going to quickly go through, how we go ahead and connect, and I'll show you how it looks like. So let's go ahead and connect here. As you can see, this is my public address, IP address, which I used to connect, and the port is 3389. I'll go ahead and download the RDP file, and let's connect. All right. I have to speed up because we have too much of content. I think we have less time. Okay. Okay. All right. So I'm just going to go ahead and connect to my VM. All right. So this is my SQL Server. When you purchase a license with Microsoft, when it is regarding to SQL, right, you will always find a SQL ISO file, which is nothing but the setup file, right? This is the SQL media. So by default, we store it in the C drive, but SQL is pre-installed. So it's ready to use when you deploy a VM, right? You don't have to go and install the SQL. We take care of everything and make sure your SQL is up to date. If there is a service pack one released, right, we go ahead and release, we go ahead and apply that service pack as one service pack here as well. So if, this is on SP2 probably 5579. So we make sure your SQL is on the latest version. It is well tested. So before we release an image, right, SQL with Windows or SQL with or SharePoint with Windows, anything, right, we test those images out so that you do not face any problems. So this is how we go ahead and connect to the VM. This is our SQL server. I'm ready to use that SQL server now, right? So when it comes to migration, right, there are like 11 to 12 ways. I've written many blogs as well on MSDN. If you want to migrate from your Azure portal, from your on-premise to Azure portal, right? If you want to migrate your on-premise machines to Azure VM, you can take a VHD copy, right, and move them. So I've written many of them articles as well, right, on MSDN. So you can go through that. And now we'll go back to the slides. So as I showed, right, this is probably the next thing we'll discuss. So when do you think you should go for SQL IaaS or SQL VM when you're on Azure? So high service level agreement time to be met. So like recovery time objective, recovery point objective is, let's say, you make sure your VM. I think there is a question. I'll answer that in a minute, right? So when you think your VM recovery time or your data loss time should not be more than 5 minutes, right? Or if you have a specific period amount of time, right? When you have a high SLA time to be met, that my Windows machine should not be down for this time, or my SQL should not be down for this much time, then is the proper time to go for SQL IaaS VM, because we have we configure backups, we have services to take a snapshot of your VM. We have availability sets, availability zone, which would make sure your VMs are up and running always, right? So then you can plan to go for SQL on Azure, because you have a high SLA time to be met. Your production is 24 hours busy, 365 days. You cannot even take a downtime. Even for downtime, you have to wait for months. So that is when you can go for Azure, right? Uh, Infrastructure costs, yes, less administration. You have, a lot of people who are handling the server, right? Uh, so probably this reduces your administration cost when it comes to Windows, right? Maintaining the storage, you have storage administrators, network administrators, right? You so you probably save a lot of cost because Microsoft is taking care of your infrastructure here, right? Microsoft takes care of your network, NIC cards, right? It takes care of your disks. So there you save a lot of money there because you don't have to pay to the vendors as well for the disk cost, right? You just pay as you go. So as you use your services, you will only pay for that. Even if you shut down the VM, right, you only get charged for disk, but not for network or any other resources which you have. So that is how you save infrastructure cost, less administration. If you have support costs, right, if you having some issues with disk, let's say there is a disk bottleneck, now for that you go to the disk vendor, they will charge you for some amount, right? So in that scenario you also save the support costs there, right? Because Microsoft, if you are on enterprise, normally provides you, free service, free support, right? So that is how, you save a lot of money when you're on cloud rather than on premise. Scalability option, right? So if my VM size is small, if you see from now, let's say I'm having like 8 CPUs, 64 GB RAM, and 10 disks, right? But after 10 years, if my business is growing, right, the data will also grow, correct? uh, my workload will grow, so I'll have some new stored procedures. I have some new scripts which will be running on the server. So accordingly you have the scalability option where you can, resize your VM to go to a higher number of CPUs, so you don't need to redeploy, and stuff, right? So this option is there not just with disks but also with VM size, CPU, network, the amount of IOPS you use, right? So even that one, so that will help you out to easily scale up, scale down according to your requirements, right? And then flexibility to use your own licenses. Now if you have a SQL or OS license, right, why do you want to pay to Microsoft, right? You save a lot of money there. All you pay is just for the disks and the compute resources when you have kept your VM online, but you don't have to pay for the licensing cost, right? Because you have your own license there. So that is how if you have these options in mind, you can easily migrate to SQL VM, and you save a lot of money when you compare to on-premise. So as I said, right, as you can see in the next slide, right, when you are on premise, right, you have your own servers, you have your own license, you have your own network, you pay a lot. On Microsoft, it's a hybrid cloud, right? So you share, apart from disks, your server and everything is kept in the same data centers, right? According to you deploy. So that is how you save a lot of money when you're on cloud rather than, even lower administration, as you can see the graph, right? So that is how, you'll save a lot of cost. Plus, you make sure your VMs are high availability, and you got a lot of backups, automated backups going on as well. So that is why we see a lot of people now moving to the cloud. So all right, so we'll go to the next slide. Yeah. So commonly used features for SQL IaaS VM, right? So these are the commonly used features: automated patching, SQL IaaS agent, managed backups, availability sets. So we already discussed about availability sets. They make sure when two VMs, are there, and if something happens in one of the data centers, at least one VM is online at one point of time. So your production is always up and running. So we guarantee 99.95% of SLA time, right? We make sure your VMs are always up and running. So these options we will discuss now. We'll go back to the Azure portal, right? So what I wanted to show is this one. When you're using SQL on Azure, right, we provide a special option in the blade where we discuss about SQL Server configuration here. So as you can see, it is telling you about your currently drives which you have on your machines. By default, this D drive is a temporary drive. So this, you don't get charged for, because Microsoft, by default, with each VM gives a D drive, which is a temporary drive, which is a SSD drive, which is fast. So normally we don't suggest to keep your private data here because it can get deleted anytime. So this gives you a overall statistics on how much the SQL data folder has, or SQL log folder is occupied with, how much data is filled in the drive. So this gives you a storage usage metric here. You know. Then we've got SQL connectivity level. What port is SQL listening on? It's 1433. Do we have SQL authentication enabled? So that is again enabled. Automated patching. Now this is normally when you think you do not have time for patching, right? Or you want a specific time that your VM should get patched automatically, right? So we have this option here. Whatever patches are marked as critical, right? That gets applied automatically. So here, uh, this is actually kind of, let's say there is an immediate, critical update which has come in, and let's say you're not aware about it. So we take care of that. We automatically go ahead and apply that patch according to the date and time you select here. So we select a maintenance time. Let's say my business is, normally offline after 12 o'clock. So I can specify 2 a.m. in the night, right? And I can specify a maintenance window duration as well. So that is how we take care, of applying patches. Automated backup is nothing but your SQL databases, right? Get backed up automatically to the cloud when you have this option enabled. So here it gives you an option, how much time of day, how much days you want the retention of this to be, or what storage account. So it normally gets backed up to the storage account, right? So as you can see, it says all your SQL databases will be backed up automatically once you enable this, right? Azure Key Vault is nothing but when you use, TDE, that is transparent data encryption, right? Or when you encrypt your database, you store keys, normally encryption keys. So that gets stored in the Azure Key Vault on the cloud. So for extra enhanced layer of security. So that is what we had to discuss about SQL configuration. Now, when it comes to SQL IaaS agent extension, this is very useful when it comes to Azure VM. So when you deploy a VM, by default, this extension gets deployed. Now, what this extension does is it goes ahead and normally acts like a service, okay, in SQL Server. So this is the one, Microsoft SQL Server IaaS agent, okay. So this helps Microsoft. So this also helps you to back up your databases on the cloud with the automated backup feature, which I showed just a few seconds back. So this automated. So this whole configuration blade works on the IaaS agent extension. Your backups will automatically get scheduled. Your patching will automatically get scheduled using that IaaS extension, right? So that is why the IaaS extension is very useful, right? We have the SQL configuration blade. It's totally dependent on the IaaS extension. Now, this also helps Microsoft in one of the ways. So let's say your SQL is not functioning correctly or something is going wrong, right? So your error log folders inside the SQL VM, your, let's say, event logs, right? All of that data is fetched by the SQL IaaS agent, okay? And it is shared to Microsoft automatically once you open a support request on the Azure portal, right? So this helps the engineers as well. If you open a ticket, right, engineers already have the logs here. They have the insight, okay, this was going on at this time. They would normally ask you for the time, okay, when did the issue occur? Then they will check the logs. So most of the logs are automatically captured by this IaaS agent. Now these logs, are normally, only engineers can only see at Microsoft these logs when customer approves the permission while opening the service request. So when the customers open service request, they have an option to select, okay, I would like to share my logs with Microsoft. So this IaaS agent will automatically collect the logs. So that is how, it is very important, for troubleshooting purposes or for many various other features. So even we have different mechanisms where you can go ahead and collect logs apart from that. So let's go ahead and then discuss. I think that was all for the session. Yeah, let me go back to. Okay, so that's all for the session. I think if you have any questions, I'll go ahead and answer them. Let's see. So that's all, a basic 100 level understanding on how, you can deploy SQL VMs or what offerings do you have. So this was our main agenda to discuss a little bit important features available on Azure, how we help you out, how flexible Azure is to help you out and, move your, environments to Azure and save a lot of money. So even about scaling flexibility, plus as well as every other day, right? We have a lot of service coming in Azure. We are highly working on Azure because it's our main focus. So we're trying to develop more apps, more features which users can use, right? So we have a lot of features available here as well. So this is nothing but when it comes to mobile as well, you got a lot of options here. So every new other day, right? Azure, the learning never stops. Every new other day there is a new feature which comes in Azure. So it's very vast, and I would say that it's very flexible and easy to use as well. So that is all we had to discuss about SQL IaaS VM, right? Let me go back to the chat. Let me see if we have any
Hello.
questions. Yeah.
Hi, Ujjwal, Ivan here. I have a
Yeah.
quick question. With regards to like how the information has an option to always customize the jobs for integrity check or for the SQL side. I mean, the
Mhm.
integrity check or the index management or providing an alert whenever you find an hardware is not performing or something like that. So it had that flexibility to send an email or notify us with a text. So what about that? Can you please explain? I mean, give an overview. How is that been addressed on cloud?
So it's exactly the same like your on-premise, but just hosted on the cloud. So all the functionalities are the same. Like let's say if your job is failing, right? You need an alert. So you configure a DB mail, correct? So it's just similar. Everything is same, but the only thing is it's hosted on the cloud. So that's why you don't have to. So the only difference is Microsoft is taking care of your infrastructure
So,
here.
so in the portal, it cannot be done. It's always has to be on that particular instance, and we
No,
have
on
to.
the portal also we have some options when it comes to performance counter and all, right?
So
We
it will
have
be
some
of
options.
the. It will be on the resource group or either the entire VM. It cannot be. Suppose I have one VM and I have installed two instances on that.
Mhm.
So I have to always go into that instance and configure this thing. I mean, what I'm asking is that is there a generic platform where we can configure for all of those instances, whatever we want from the portal. We don't want to go to the
So
instance
are
level
you
and
asking
configure.
about SQL performance or Windows performance here?
I'm asking about the SQL performance
Okay. For SQL
setup to be
performance,
done.
we have to
Yeah.
capture a PSH diagram.
Okay.
Yeah, it's just like on-premise. So if you have multiple instances, and if you think one instance is slow, so we'll have to capture a PSH diag for that instance. When it comes to the Azure portal, this will overall give you an idea of the VM. So if you think your CPU is going high, right, about 90%, you can configure alerts for that here.
Okay.
If you see, this is overall metrics of the VM. So when it comes to SQL configuration from the Azure portal, you only have this option where it tells you about the patching thing. If there is any critical SQL patch which is available,
Okay.
right? Your
Okay.
system should apply it, so it will automatically apply it. And for backups, when you're considering your SQL backups should be safe, database backup should be backed up on the cloud. So this will go ahead and back it up on the Azure cloud storage. So these are the
Okay.
only options available for SQL part. But when it comes to the alerts and all, or for instance level, right? It has to be we have to go to the VM and then configure the PSH diag accordingly.
Okay. So any I mean any news or because I think this is one of the I mean that is what is not been on Azure portal that would like I would like to see that the SQL configuration, the SQL instance level configuration and all can be done in the portal, which will allow the maintain the instance very easily as comparatively to go and like suppose I want to create an alert on the instance level
Mhm.
or something, so I
Right.
have to go inside the instance and do it. What I mean to say,
Correct.
can this be also done on the portal level? Because I mean you are a Microsoft guy, so I'm pushing this idea to you directly. Said if it
Mhm.
would be very much helpful if we can have those system to be on the portal and we can configure instance level, which will make it as like a one platform
Mhm. So
mechanism
the
rather
only
going into
problem here is what
yeah
happens here is, you can
yeah
have multiple instances on the VM, right? But
yeah
from the portal side, it will be very difficult because we'll have to scan through all the registries and first identify how many instances we have, right? We have to go
okay
to the reg edit and first understand, okay, we have like 10 instances on the VM. So collecting metrics for each of them, okay, again, will use your computer resources, right, on the VM. Because
okay
let's say you have like only two CPUs and 4 GB memory, right? You would
okay
not like, so not every customer would like to go ahead and collect that metrics for all the 10 instances. That would probably use some reads, right, on the disk to understand how many IOPS are going through, or kind of SQL perfmon, let's say. It's just nothing but perfmon, right? This is giving you an overall view of the
yes
perfmon. Correct. So it will, you would not like your perfmon to run for, the whole server at every point of time. Or you would not like, a little bit of PSH DAG capture, which will see how much CPU is there in SQL being used by one of the instances, being captured every time, which would make your VM slow. So that is the only reason, we've not configured anything from the SQL point of view. So
okay
that is why, because you can have multiple instances, but collecting all those data, right, will again require the compute like CPU and memory, right? So we don't want to
okay
overload that, or that normally you are only paying for CPU plus memory, correct? So we don't
yeah
want you to be getting or maybe you'll be complaining that probably my VM is slow because we are collecting so much of data. So we kept the collection of the data very minimal, right?
okay
And it's like nothing, you don't even get charged, hardly you get charged for that. Okay, I don't think you also get charged for this computer, which metrics which we are showing.
okay
So that is a plus point, because if you collect for 10 instances, the compute which you will be spending, or the amount you will be spending would be too much. So that is why we do not specify this, or I also don't see this in the roadmap which would come in, where you can see this on Azure portal. So I don't think that would come in for sure. So it's only
okay
for the
thank
VM thing we can show here. Yeah.
okay thank you.
All right. So yeah, any other questions? I see a lot of questions here.
Yeah,
Let
yeah,
me.
Ujjwal,
Yeah,
Syed
hi
this side.
Ujjwal, Praveen here.
Yeah, Praveen, tell me.
Yeah, hi Ujjwal, Praveen here. Yeah, Ujjwal, here you have pointed a stop and delocation. So that
Correct.
delocation pointing to the decommission part, or we can start at as per our requirement.
You can start. What happens when you deallocate a machine? Correct.
Yeah.
So let's
Mhm,
say if I go
mhm.
here, let me go here, right? You see the status stopped deallocated. Deallocated means
Yeah.
once I click on this VM, this is my DC, right? Whatever you see
Mhm.
here, right? The networking, the NIC card,
Yeah.
correct?
Mhm.
That gets released.
Yeah.
So you're not using that.
Okay.
Your public IP, right? That gets released, right? Uh, Apart from
Okay.
disks, everything gets released.
Mhm.
So you don't get charged for it. Deallocating is nothing but releasing your resource. So that somebody can
Okay.
use it. So Azure is a hybrid cloud. We have like 1,000 customers, right?
Yeah.
More than 1,000, right?
Okay.
Which would go ahead and share resources accordingly. So if you are using, let's say, if you are having a public IP address, 192.168.2.12, right? So once you
Okay.
deallocate the VM, that IP gets released. So
Uh-huh.
let's say if you have deployed a VM, you have a public IP address, you have stopped the VM, you have
Mhm.
deallocated it. Okay, tomorrow,
Okay.
let's say I have deployed a VM. Now, which public IP you were using will get allocated to me. So that is how it works. So you don't get charged for it. So
Okay.
if you
So
want,
that
you
will be
also have an option for static IP.
so it means it's totally decommissioned from there. I will not be able to take my stuff back, or else it will be remain there on that location.
No, no, location will be same. Everything will be there. But just like
Okay.
I'm giving an example of public IP address.
Yeah.
So
Okay. Yeah,
that
that will be
IP
different.
address will change. Yeah. But if you want to
Okay.
keep the same IP
Once we
address, you
have
can also
started it,
create a
we'll change
static
the combine.
IP.
Okay.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct. Correct.
One more question, Ujjwal.
Yeah.
So, is this only costing as per hourly? I mean, support what we are getting, or is it based on size space also? Like if we are going for 8 CPU, 32 GB, 1 TB, or
Mhm.
4 CPU, 8 GB, 500 GB. So it is based on that. I mean, costing is based on the size space also, or only support what we are getting hourly based.
No, no. So normally you get charged for the size you're choosing, hourly basis on that
Okay.
size.
Okay.
So every size will be
Okay.
charged differently, right? So if you're using
Okay.
like
Okay.
let's say I'm using 2 GB and you're using 8 GB, right?
Yeah.
For an
Mhm.
hour. So you will get charged more because the amount of memory you have selected is more,
Yeah, space
right?
sizing or configuration. Yeah,
Correct.
yeah.
Correct.
Okay. Thanks a lot. Thanks a lot,
Yeah.
Azza. That's it for my
All
side.
right. Yeah. Any other question, guys?
Yeah,
Yeah,
Ujjwal,
Ujjwal,
Ujjwal has
Sayyid this side.
hello.
My
Yeah.
Say
question
we
is
can.
just a continuation for that. Mahapatra asked that for configuration of backup failure from the
Uh-huh.
portal, do we have any services? What I heard, there's something like recovery vault services. So can
Yes.
you
Recovery
just a
vault
little
service.
bit brief us about the configuration of little alert from the portal? Apart from backup, anything else we can configure for the alert point of view?
So alert point of view is normally this is normally for the VM type. Okay. So
Yes.
this is normally if I say let's actually if you can see my screen, if I create a new alert, right? I have an criteria option to add. What do I want to monitor? I want to monitor CPU. I want to monitor network in, network out. What is network in, network out is ingress and outgress. The amount of data you are sending to the Azure VM, the amount of data you are sending from Azure VM to some other machine. So then
Mhm.
again, we have got CPU credits and all. So this you can, configure. We got a lot of alerts. If you see, right? Let me just minimize this, right? If you
So
see, we
for
got
this,
a lot of
we
options here.
require SMP protocol for
So
configuration of mail alert.
DB mail, right? If you're talking about
Yes,
DB
yes.
mail, yes. For DB mail, yes. For these alerts, you don't need. For these alerts are on the VM level, so you don't need it. For DB mail, you need it.
Okay, okay. Thanks. Ujjwal,
Yes.
it is what I believe is that I've been asking that uh, when will be there an option in Azure portal that we can
Uh-huh.
configure everything with regards to the SQL alerts in the Azure portal. We don't want to go to the machine inside the machine and inside the uh,
Uh-huh.
instance level and create it. The
Right.
concern
Mm,
is
For those alerts, for those alerts, right?
uh,
When it comes to, if you deploy an image with SQL, probably I
hmm,
can put this suggestion to the SQL product team, right?
yes,
Who
yes,
sits in Redmond right now. So I
yeah,
can check with them if there is any, chances to or probability to go ahead and incorporate this feature.
yes.
But we'll have to check. Normally you want alerts on probably high usage of CPU of SQL Server or something like that, right?
No,
When
there
it
is a
comes
lot
to
of other.
performance,
There is like
backup failures and all.
severity levels. blocking and something. Yeah. This, so what will happen? It will reduce our time to go into each of the VMs and how as easy is to use a portal. So, so if we use that portal, we will be more efficient on working on multiple instance level SQL instance level configuration. Rather going inside to each of those instances and creating it, it really takes hell amount of time.
Right, right. I
That's
understand.
what
So
I
I'll
mean.
probably put
Yeah,
this feedback forward to the PG team.
yeah,
Let's see what they have to say.
yep.
We'll have a check
Thank
with
you.
them.
Yeah.
All
Thanks,
right.
thanks.
Any other question, guys?
Uh,
Yeah,
One
hello.
more, Ujjwal, like when we build from AMI SQL Server, so can we define the location of the SQL system databases, or it uses by default C drive?
So by default, it uses C drive, right?
Can we
But
change it?
yeah, you can anytime change it. Once the VM is deployed, you can
No,
internally
at the time
change
of
it
the
from the.
installation, by default, from the beginning, can we put something that it can take a new path apart from C drive?
So from the beginning, we don't have an option to put those files at the same location. But yeah, I think this is a good idea. We can shoot this. Let me go ahead and check this out. 1 second.
What I observed sometime that it's
It won't.
taking temp.db is taking F drive, but F
F drive,
drive
yeah.
is not.
So for some
Yeah.
VMs, how we have configured the VM. So normally how the product team does is when they deploy the VM, right, they test it out, right? They put all the system databases in the C drive. On some of the images, they put the temp.db on the F drive by default, right? So this feedback one is alerts for SQL on Azure portal, right? And then second one was location for system databases in the images. So by default it is C. Yeah, you cannot change it when you are deploying a VM, but yeah, once it is deployed, we can normally change it by alter
Yeah,
database
we
modify
can do
file.
it after later on, but the concern what I was like to highlight that it's taking F drive, so that is taken by the backend team that you are.
Yes, by default, some of the images we put tempdb drive on the F drive by default. Data we'll create two folders, data and log file in the F drive, and we put the MDF and LDF in the F drive. That is only for some images, but where you don't have extra disks, right? We put everything on the C drive then.
Okay, well, thanks.
All right. So yeah, guys, any other question?
Ujjwal, this is Abhishek here. Ujjwal, let's say I have a variable load, like a one-time load, and how can I provision like more computing power during that load only, and after that I want to go back to my normal usage?
So only for some time you want to go ahead and upgrade, right? So normally, let's say you have two CPU, right? You want to test out some load testing and all, right? You go ahead and increase the VM size for a few hours, maybe 2 or 3 hours, right? For that 2 3 hours, you will get charged extra, maybe according to the amount of CPU and RAM you select, right? And
Okay.
once your testing is done, you can go ahead and reduce the size as well.
Okay,
The
I can
only
go back
thing
to
you
the
won't
normal.
be able to reduce is disk.
Uh-huh.
So with VM sizes, as I said, right, even disk sizes are there. So if you see there is a bottleneck, if you want to upgrade your disk size, right, from P10 or to P40, right, once you upgrade the disk size, you won't be able to add that disk or resize that disk to a lower size. So in that scenario, what you'll have to do is add add the same size of disk which you previously had, and then remove the size which you had upgraded, the higher one,
Okay.
because disks cannot be I mean it can be resized to a higher level, but it can go down, it can't go down.
And but CPU and memory, if I need to increase, I can increase and I can decrease this back without any
Yes,
disruptions, right?
correct.
Okay.
All right, so roadmap, Malik Arjun said, what is the roadmap for SQL DBAs? So probably I would say that if you want to go for an Azure role, probably start playing with, Azure portal. You can, go through 70-533 certification book, right? It talks everything about Azure, like Azure AD, Azure networking, cloud services, Azure platforms, Azure web apps. So you can go through that book, and then once you think, you're ready for the role, probably you can apply. But yeah, normally SQL, when it comes to SQL DBA, all you need to have is SQL knowledge and just a little bit background of the Azure portal, how it works, and Azure infrastructure, how it is defined. So then you can probably get into the Azure role. So Saikiran, without knowing SQL Server or web apps, how to connect users? So I did not get your question, Saikiran. How to connect to SQL DB to customer without knowing ID and password? So if you don't know the username, ID, and password, you can start the SQL Server in single user mode. You can reset the SA password. All right. So I think, yeah, Kasam, we can go ahead and continue the session tomorrow. We have a past session tomorrow where we're going to discuss about SQL database. So we'll discuss on how the architecture is defined tomorrow. And yeah, Kasam, you can take over.
Sure, Ujjwal.
Thank you very
Thanks
much,
a lot.
guys. Thank you for
Thank you,
attending.
Ujjwal.
Yeah,
Ujjwal,
thank
for
you.
your time. And yes, guys, we have session tomorrow at the same time, 12:30. It's about Azure PaaS offering. So if at all you guys have any questions regarding IaaS Azure, we can at the start of the session we can give 5 to 10 minutes for the same, because we have already crossed 20 minutes more as per the schedule. So, and so it's let's see, let's join tomorrow for the session at 12:30.
Sure, Kasam. Thanks.
Thank you all
All
for
right,
joining,
guys.
Thank
and
you.
looking
Thanks,
forward
Thank
for
Ujjwal.
your participation tomorrow.
Yeah,
Thank
thank you.
you. Thanks a lot.
Thank